All right, hi guys. We are on lesson number 2 of SAT Prep Linear Modeling. So the SAT tip for the day, what I have up here is that the SAT is going to ask you so many things about linearity. You have to be able to recognize linear equations in the form of an equation, a table, a graph, word problem. So I just have more problems that we're going to discuss here about linearity. So very first thing, what you'll see here is we have a line on a graph. This is a coordinate plane. The x values represent time in days, and the y values represent the amount of grain in the silo in terms of tons. And so we've got a flour mill that grinds grain stored in a silo. So a silo is one of those giant cylindrical things with like a conical roof on it that you see on like farms, and they keep apparently grain in them. Anyways, what we've got here is it's asking us to find the equation describing this plot. So two things that you need to know in terms of having a linear function is we need a slope and we need a y-intercept. And again, this is Algebra 1 stuff. I know you've already been through this before, but you need to be making sure that you're not missing problems like this on the actual SAT. These are supposed to be considered easy points, so that's why I want to just take an opportunity to refresh your memory on linear stuff. So our y-intercept is 30. That's because it touches the y-axis at 30, and this represents grains in the silo in tons. So 30 is the y-intercept. Very, very common but incorrect to give me an x-intercept in terms of the y-intercept. So make sure you're looking at the y-axis here. And then the slope is the change in y and the change in over the change in x. So I've written that here, and again, you guys can pause the video here if I go too fast, or if you want to copy stuff down and then hear the explanation, that is fine. Do what works for you. But the change in y, we're going down 5 units, it looks like. I have that here. And anywhere you look on the graph, we are going down 5 units, any points that you compare. And the change in x, it looks like we're going over 2 days. That's how we get our slope of -5 over 2, -5 over 2, -5 over 2. And so this is how we put it into our y equals m is the slope, x plus b is the y-intercept. So the equation, what does it describe? Like we've talked about, the y is tons and the x is days. And in this case, if you want to write that in terms of words, sometimes you see multiple choice questions on the SAT using words instead of y's and x's. Number of tons of grain in the silo. Here's the slope times number of days plus the y-intercept. We do have a negative decreasing slope here. That's because as the number of days increases, the amount of grain in tons decreases because they're taking the grain out of the silo and they're using it, selling it, milling it, doing whatever they need to do with it. What is the y-intercept? It's 30. What does that represent? A lot of times you'll be asked a multiple choice question about what does it represent, the y-intercept. That means at a time of 0 days. So at the very beginning of this farmer's harvest of grain, he has exactly, without having used any of it, on day 0, he has 30 tons of grain in the silo. It's usually the starting amount, or if you see the word initial or starting amount, that is your clue that we're talking y-intercept. What's the x-intercept? So I don't know what it is, but you can continue the line. We are going down 5 units and over 2, and down 5 and over 2. So you can figure out that it's 12 right here. What does that mean? He is out of grain. That means that the y value is 0. Remember, the y-axis here is grain, so there is no more grain in the silo after 12 days. He needs to buy some more, he needs to harvest some more, whatever. What's the slope of the line? Like we've talked about, it decreases by 5. The tons do as the days increase by 2. This means every 2 days, this guy goes through 5 tons of grain. If you have any interest in farming or agriculture or buying or selling inventory, these are really important things for you. If you're going into business, these are important concepts to understand. So this is as the x increases by a certain amount, so every 2 days in this case, because our units up here are in 2 days, is how we interpreted our slope. As we go to the right 2 days, the slope goes down 5 tons of grain every 2 days. Anyway, so go ahead and pause the video, you guys, and you can give these practice problems down here a try. I know here are what the answers are, but you can give them a try and then play the video and actually check your answers and see if you got them, and I'll give you a little bit of an explanation in terms of where the answers come from. So again, pause the video, try these problems, and then I will work through them kind of one at a time. So for number one, we've got this dude, Jonathan. He needs to earn at least $175 next week and can work at most 20 hours. So you guys, a little bit of a time-taking strategy here. As you know, the clock is ticking as you're working your way through this SAT. So I have some really key important words here. At least 175, what that means is it can be 175 or greater, but it needs to be at least 175. And at most 20 is it has to be less than or equal to 20. So those are just important symbols, and I wonder if just writing those down are going to help me process of eliminate any of these answers. I'm looking for greater than or equal to 175. I can cross this one out. I'm looking for greater than or equal to 175. Cross this one out. Interesting. So I'm down to a 50-50 shot without even reading the second sentence of the question. Let's also look at less than or equal to 20. So this one has already been eliminated. This one has already been eliminated. I think just by reading those words really carefully, we already know what C is the correct answer. So if you're in a time crunch, circle that one and move on, because I think we have enough information here. I do want to show you how to actually do this question, because it may not have been a multiple choice question. It could have been something free response related where you have to bubble in one of your answers. But what I want to do is I'm going to make one equation into all of my dollar information and one equation into my hours information. So I have dollars here, 175, $10, $8. I need to come up with some sort of an equation that models that information. So at least $175 would be greater than or equal to 175. And my other dollars numbers that I have highlighted here are $10 at one of the jobs. I'll call that job X. And I have $8 at another job. I'll call that Y. There is example number one. And in this case, it looks like they're using L for lawn service and G for gym. So maybe I'll change that to L and G. Okay, and that's exactly where that very first question came from. So let's write another equation, at most 20 hours. So I don't know how many hours this guy spent working his lawn job. I also don't know how many hours this guy spent working his gym job, but I know he can work no more than 20 hours. And that is exactly letter C. So just a couple things to be thinking of. At least means greater than or equal to. It can be more than that number, but at least means greater than or equal to. At most means less than or equal to. Those are just a couple things, common sense wise, to get copied down. Okay, so let's look at number two. So we have this taxi driver charging an initial fare of $3 plus 40 cents for each fifth of a mile driven. Let's first break this down and look at the initial fare of $3 that I have circled. So initial fare, starting point, anything like that, that's going to be your y-intercept. It's where you start your line when you're graphing it. It's also the beginning charge of this taxi person who's going to pick you up. Just to pick you up, they're going to charge $3, and then they're going to charge you depending on how many miles you go also. So I've got an equation, y equals mx plus b. The y-intercept is going to be my $3. In this case, I have 40 cents for each. That word each kind of means multiply, so that's your m and your x that we're looking at here. And the fifth of a mile driven, I'm going to call that my x. I want to deal with the fifth of a mile later, but I do know that he's going to charge me 40 cents per increment. And in this case, the increments are a fifth of a mile. I'll get to that later. I don't want to deal with that all at once right now. So let's first just solve. He's going to charge me a total of $27. So I've got $27 here. That's what my equation equals, so 0.4x plus 3. I'm going to subtract the 3, and I've got x equals 60, but this is 60 fifths of a mile increments. So remember, every fifth of a mile that goes by, he's going to charge me another 40 cents. So in this case, I have 60 fifth mile increments. That's what I let my x value stand for. So in this case, I need to take 60 and divide it by 5 or multiply it by 1/5. That means that I went 12 miles total. So that's really common for the SAT to ask you a question about plugging in a y-intercept, figuring out the slope, but manipulating your answer because we have a fifth of a mile increments here, not full mile increments. So 12 miles. Okay, this next one, we've got Anna, 99 centimeters tall by the day she turned 3, 106.5 centimeters tall when she turned 4, so she's growing. And it does say that Anna's height increases by the same amount each year between the ages of 2 and 8. So yeah, we could come up with a formula for this. I think that I would rather, since it's only between the years 2 and 8, kind of use a little bit of common sense conceptual way to answer this question, I guess. So what you can see is that we have 99 centimeters when she's 3 years old. She went up 7.5 centimeters to get to 106.5. I just did some basic subtraction there. When she's 4 years old, and I believe this pattern is going to continue because it does tell me she goes the same amount each year between 2 and 8. How many centimeters tall will she be when she turns 7? Do you see the pattern? I'm just going to continue the pattern. She's 5, she's 6, she's 7, she is 129 centimeters tall. Last question. Mrs. Kellen's most recent math test consisted of 50 questions. Some of the questions were worth 2 points, some of them were worth 3 points. Here's another example where I want to write 2 different equations. I want one with number of questions, and I want one equation with points. So I'm going to highlight everything that it has to do with points. 2 points, 115 points, 3 points. So I'm going to let my 2-point questions be x. I'm going to say 2x. I'm going to let my 3-point questions be y equals 115. So every number in this mumble jumble of math formula story problem that has points with it, I've written an equation. And I don't know how many of each number of questions there are, so x and y, there are 50 questions total. In this case, what I have to do is use substitution or elimination to solve the problem. Maybe I will multiply the whole bottom row by -2. It's going to turn it into -2x minus 2y equals -100. I just distributed -2 to everything here. And so now I can cancel out my 2 x's, and I get y equals 15. And remember, that's y. Unfortunately, the question is asking me how many questions are worth 2 points. So what I could have done is I could have quicker solved this equation by eliminating y and coming up with x right away. As you know, there are multiple ways to do substitution and elimination and still get the correct answer. But in this case, it's not too difficult to just plug back in. Remember, this is my answer for y, and it's very common to put the wrong answer in even though you did the question correctly. So read really carefully and make sure you're answering the right question. I'm going to put the 15 in right here. I can just do some mental math. X plus 15 equals 50. That means x equals 35. Remember, x equals my 2-point question, so I'm going to bubble 35. Just as an FYI, in case you were curious, you can put the 35 in the first 2 slots or the second 2 slots. Doesn't matter. Thanks for watching, you guys. We've got math teachers available to you during your lunch periods. See Schoology so that you can get that Zoom information if you ever want to go over individual questions or get some specific help from math teachers during your lunch period. Thanks for watching.